What's going on, everybody, and welcome to another episode of The Terror Table, a horror movie podcast presented by the Saskatchewan Podcast Network. I am one of your regular hosts that you hear every single week. My name is Mitch Oliver, and with me today I have...
You got Kyle?
And in brand new Dolby surround sound, you have Boozy.
Dolby Atmos. We're a year and a half in to a pandemic.
Yep.
and we get Boozy. We finally were able to get Boozy a podcast mic. So from here on out, I think just the quality in general is going to boost. But of course, like what pushed us to make sure we all have the best mics we can have, the best sound that we can possibly have. What could have pushed us to make it happen for today, for this episode?
What could it be?
Oh, Boozy, would you like to?
We just got paid.
Ladies and gentlemen, this episode we talk to Dean Cundey, the cinematographer of movies. Like you'll hear me say this all again, so I don't think I need to do it here. But I think we just finished talking to him about 5 minutes ago, and we're on a Dean
high. We're on a straight Dean high right now.
Yeah, and I wanted to make sure all three of us are here to intro this episode because this is an incredibly special one for us. I think I can safely say, I don't think we even talked about this yet, but boys, I think this was a great episode, and this was a great interview.
Yeah. Welcome to the Terror Table debrief. And to start the debrief, I want to say that indeed was a good episode, Mitch. I agree.
Yeah.
We killed it. And also, Dean, nicest guy on earth.
Yeah, it couldn't have asked for a better experience with a legend like that. Like, this is the man who was there shooting Jurassic Park. He shot Halloween 2, The Thing.
I can't fully fathom that. Like, it blows my mind.
Guys, let's not forget that it's Dean Cundey, ASC. He deserves
That's a good point.
His ASC.
Yeah, he does.
We got to put some respect on his name. But incredible. We did that.
Yeah, it was amazing. And I'm just so happy that we can share it on our feed. And I know Dean had mentioned multiple times to us that he's just happy to, be able to offer up some anecdotes for our listeners and, get a peek into the mind of a man who's his influence on cinema in general is just...
And there are just some good bits in here that I think some listeners out there, everyone is going to go home today with at least one valuable piece of information. I swear to God.
He had some great advice for just anybody overall.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Especially if you're interested in the craft of filmmaking, but you do not need to be interested in that side of things to get something out of this episode because it's tremendous. But I love there's so many things he talked about, like his influence on old movies. I'm excited for Daniel and the Cobwebs listeners to maybe come over and hear Dean Cundey talking about Turner Classic Movies. It's just
that's awesome.
It's awesome. Yeah, I don't think we'll spoil anything else. We just wanted to dip in here, start this episode off together, and usher in this interview that we had. So, do you guys have anything you want to add before we let the show roll?
Let's get into it. Let's get right into it.
Absolutely. All right, everyone. Hope you enjoy this episode of The Terror Table with very, very special guest, Dean Cundey.
ASC.
Direct West is a proud partner of the Saskatchewan Podcast Network. Is marketing getting in the way of running your business? Direct West has a local expert team right here in Saskatchewan that will work with you to build your website exactly how you imagine it. Let them help you improve your online presence and head to directwest.com to learn more.
Happy, happy Halloween, Halloween, Halloween. Happy, happy Halloween, Silver Shamrock.
All right, so today it is our great honor to welcome a true cinematic legend. He was voted one of Kodak's 100 best cinematographers of all time and has over 100 credits as a cinematographer, including 5 of John Carpenter's feature films like Halloween, The Fog, Escape from New York, The Thing, and Big Trouble in Little China. He also shot 6 of Robert Zemeckis' feature films, including Romancing the Stone, the Back to the Future trilogy, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and Death Becomes Her. He also, of course, shot 2 of Steven Spielberg's monumental feature films, like Hook and Jurassic Park. We couldn't possibly be more excited to welcome Mr. Dune Cundey to the Terror Table.
Thank you, gentlemen, very much. It's a pleasure to be able to talk to you and to your audience and share some of my experiences and thoughts.
Absolutely. Thanks so much. And first of all, I just wanted to say, I think it's safe to say that all three of us have at one point in our lives worn out the tape on countless films that you photographed. Like, my family still mentions almost every family dinner about how obsessive I was with Steven Spielberg's Hook.
And I've mentioned several times in the show, I wore out several copies of Jurassic Park throughout the years, and I own several more copies.
Yeah, and I'll add to the sentiment.
Thank you very
Back to the Future has been a huge. All 3 films have been instrumental in my family's lineage, I guess, growing up and throughout my entire life at this point. So we thank you for all your hard work.
Well, it's been hard work, but it's also been a great pleasure to be able to participate in some film history, which I hope that doesn't sound too ostentatious and
definitely not.
But and that's one of the things that I think I appreciate about what I have done is that I hope this doesn't sound too morbid, but I'll be able to leave something behind that hopefully will be watched by generations from now. A lot of times I'll go to a meeting or a convention or something and have people come up and say, "Oh, I saw Jurassic Park or or Hook or whatever. When I was a kid, it was one of the first movies my parents would let me watch." I say, "Oh, well, thank you very much. I'm glad you were able to do that." And he'd say, "Yeah, now my son is, and what that means to me is it's like been 3 generations of people who have seen and appreciated the things I've done." So, I feel very sort of proud about that.
Well, your library speaks for itself with that, and I'm sure it'll continue to. I'm sure once I have kids, they're going to be watching everything you put out.
Yeah, my nieces are all just obsessed with Jurassic Park right now. So it's so exciting watching my sister's children grow up watching the same movies that I loved and that my sisters loved. And yeah, it's safe to say that your catalog of films is going to last a very, very long time, Dean.
Absolutely. Not many things make it through several generations, so it says a lot that the films you've been a part of and, had your hands on have done so. So you should really be proud of yourself, and that's fantastic, and I'm happy to hear more about it.
As I say, I've been delighted to be able to participate. I wish I could say that I had created all of these films completely by myself. But if I said that, I would be such a liar. So,
Yeah, you photograph some of the most monumental moments in cinema history, both blockbusters like Jurassic Park and Back to the Future, and then low-budget horror films like Halloween that would go on to become classics. So what are some of the memories that come to mind when filming bizarre horror sequences, like the chest swallowing the arms in The Thing, or the iconic POV opening of Halloween?
well, it's interesting because a lot of people say, "Oh, I can't watch horror films. They're too scary." And I have to remind them that it's only a movie. All they're doing is sitting in front of their TV or they're in a theater watching this flat screen that has, essentially moving colored shadows. And it's not real. But, the task of the filmmaker is to get you sucked into it, to make you feel, to experience it as if it's real. Well, for us on the other side of the camera, we are very aware of the fact that it's not real. We're just there, having actors do scary stuff and and putting dark shadows where things could be lurking, and moving the camera in mysterious ways, and composing things so that that the evil pops out of the shadows or the closet or whatever, So we are just the craftsmen, so it's kind of fun to look at and talk to people about how affected they are by the images they see, and how well we created them or put them together, or whatever, so that people do experience the effect that we're trying to do, whether it's horror or comedy or fantasy, adventure, whatever. And the fact that we have this sort of distance that, when I go watch the horror film, I look at it, not that it scares me or I'm terrified. It is sort of like, oh, that was effective. I'm glad we did that. Or, well, we could have done that better, or whatever, So I have a little different perspective on horror. And while I try to reassure people, I also don't want to destroy the illusion, right? I don't want to tell people, well, no, just think about it as a flat image. I'd say, well, thank you very much. I'm glad we touched your emotions.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can say, for all of us, I was watching Jurassic Park and all this stuff at such a young age that it was all real for me. So to grow up and know that there are people, behind all the images and constructing everything, and, adding the cinematic voice, it's just so interesting to learn about, and it rejuvenates the love for all these stories that you've been a part of.
Yeah, I think that's part of the fun of it, is knowing that they're only rubber dinosaurs. They're not real. We didn't go out and capture some, if we could. But the fact is that we know they're rubber. But if we do our job properly, if we do the art properly, and the technique and technology, we get people to forget that there are no dinosaurs. We get them to forget that that the guy with the mask and the knife isn't real. And I think that's a lot of the fun and satisfaction in what I do.
I have a couple questions, just kind of going back. This is quite a bit earlier in your career. What was the differences you kind of learned in terms of, just because we're a horror podcast, we kind of focus more on that. What was kind of the differences you learned in cinematography early on, working with a director like Reginald Lee Borg when you did So Evil, My Sister, who came up in the 40s, versus working with someone like a young John Carpenter for Halloween?
Well, it's interesting. I've worked with a lot of directors, obviously.
Yes, quite a few.
Yeah. Early in my career, before Halloween, I did 15 or so low-budget action films, a couple of which were supposed to be horror films. I felt at the time that some of the directors just felt that the camera was a device for recording actors talking, as opposed to a way to engage the audience visually with the story, with the atmosphere, with the location that they're supposed to be in, and engage them emotionally. And I would attempt to suggest a camera angle or some movement or a way of visually telling the story, and was frustrated at times when somebody would say, "Oh, that's too much trouble." But I was encouraged when a director would say, "Oh, let's try that. Yeah, that could be good." and you go to the dailies, and then you look at the finished film and realize, yes, it was a good idea. And so I was fortunate in being able to have a place to learn and try out visual storytelling, because as I talk to people, I say that's essentially what I do. There's writers who do the words, there's actors who do the characters, and the director who coordinates all that. But my concentration is visual storytelling, engaging the audience with the images. And so it was really kind of great to do all of these low-budget films and have a chance to experiment, have a chance to learn how to relate to actors, to the director, to crew, and so forth. It's interesting because there are guys who come up through the what we call the studio system, even though now they're independent films, but where you get a job as a camera assistant, and then you move up to first camera assistant, then you move up to operator, and so forth, and you're always watching decisions being made. And if you're good and perceptive, you learn from that, and you remember what did work and what didn't work, and so forth. But a lot of times you're so busy with the job, you don't have a chance to sort of sit and analyze. I was fortunate in that I was kind of thrown into it from the top. I did a little bit of technical work, and then I worked in some other areas of film. I did makeup and special effects and things like that, all the while knowing I wanted to be a cinematographer. So I was sort of learning some of the other people's crafts and techniques. But I was fortunate in that I began very early in my career as a cinematographer, having to think about the images and think about working with the director and actors and so forth. And so I think it was trial by fire in that, and I was able to learn very quickly and almost harshly, but it made you concentrate. And so when I had my opportunity with John Carpenter, I think I was prepared to, and obviously it's always an upward movement of moving from one job up to the next. But I was incredibly impressed by the fact that John Carpenter was also a visual storyteller. He thought about the camera. He thought about engaging the audience with the camera and the images. And he wasn't the guy who thought of the camera as a device to record actors talking, but as a way to engage an audience. And so I was incredibly fortunate in being able to meet and work with John, and he and I would progress up the ladder, as it were, as we worked.
That's fantastic. I mean, now that we're getting into a bit more of your ever expansive career, it's pretty clear that you've had a chance to work with some of the greatest filmmakers of all time, Spielberg, Carpenter, Zemeckis, and even the honorable and friend of the show, Joe Dante. Having worked on films for almost 50 years now, what is it like looking back on your accomplishments, and maybe what are the aspects of your profession as a cinematographer that have drastically changed or even stayed consistent over time?
Well, that's actually a good question. I came up when we were still using film, when the camera was separate and the sound was recorded separately and so forth. It was the system that had progressed a little for 100 years, and it it was, by today's standards, sort of primitive, although it's still pretty sophisticated. But and it made one think about every decision, because when you set up a light, and you set up a lens and a camera angle, and you set an f-stop on the lens, and all of these decisions that you made, as I like to describe, all the work you do out in front of the lens, it travels through the lens as light and gets captured on film. Whatever you did out there is stuck on the film. And you have to have made all these decisions properly. Compared to the digital world now, where you can put out a light or set up a camera angle or whatever and run over to the monitor and see almost exactly what you are getting, or at least, what the potential for it. And if you say, oh, I don't like that, you can run out and fix that. And if you come back and say, yeah, oh no, it was better the other way, but maybe I'll put the light over here, you can sort of, manipulate the stuff you're seeing out there. And when it's captured, it is what you saw and what you did. So that's been, I think, one of the big differences in how we work. And it's gotten even more and more interesting, sophisticated, complex. The technology now, we're going into what we're calling virtual filmmaking. I just finished a series that the stage is a large room, say 30, 40 feet high by 120 feet square or whatever. Inside the stage is a large circular screen that goes 25 feet high, and it wraps around the outside walls so that when you stand in the middle, you are, everywhere you look, you're looking at an LED screen, a TV screen. And what that allows is you to put on that screen any image you want. It can be real film of a location, or in our case, a digital CGI, set, a completely fantastic building. And you build a little bit of a set on the inside of this area, and all around you is a new world, a virtual world. And it allows you to create sequences and stuff that otherwise are almost impossible. There's no way you could afford to build a set that looks out onto a fantastic city. You would have to do it in some way, but this is a whole new area where we're going. And the lighting has changed. We now use LED lights a lot compared to the tungsten lights, the conventional lights that we used to use. And so they create a different quality of light. So we're constantly adapting to the new technology, the lighting, the visual effects, the volume, as we call this giant TV screen that we're in the middle of. We're constantly adapting to this new way, and it's moving faster and faster. Like I say, for the first 100 years or so with film, evolution came, relatively slowly. They'd make a new tool, they'd make a new technique, but it was just a refinement of something that went before. Now, the things we're doing are so radically different that it's hard to keep up. The reason I'm doing this this series with all of this incredible technology is just to say, what's happening, where are we going, and how can I stay apprised of what we're doing.
Dean, I gotta ask, and it's totally okay if this is something that you're not able to talk about at the moment, but by the way that you're describing this new experience that you had, you're credited as being working as a cinematographer on a couple of episodes of the upcoming Star Wars: The Book of Boba Fett, which is a spinoff of The Mandalorian. Like, this is a style, or I guess a franchise that you hadn't worked in before. So what I guess I'm wondering is the magic still there for you? Like, when you go into a place that's filming something as grand as Star Wars, and you see the different ways that people are doing things, like, do you still have that love and that passion that you've started your career with?
Absolutely. I think this new challenging technology is what intrigues me. I got into film because as a kid, when I was like 10 years old, I would go to the movies and see these films. Like the one that stands out for me a lot is Disney's 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. And I don't know if your audience has seen it, but I would recommend it as a look back into film history. And it's a crossover to what we do in film, which is literature. Jules Verne, one of the great science fiction writers of his time, was able to invent these worlds that were impossible in the imaginations of most people back in those days. I was intrigued by the fact that we were able to take imagination that you had to read a book and create the images in your mind. We were able to create the images on a screen for your eyes to see, and then it goes into your brain. And to me, it was fantastic as a kid, the magic of film, of the storytelling. So I got intrigued with magical storytelling very early on, and I decided that's what I wanted to do. I've been very, very fortunate to actually do what I wanted to do, and I think that's one of the things that appeals to me most about what we're doing now. Is we're taking it to the next step. We're creating images and scenes and sequences and movies that are, beyond the imagination of reading them on a book, because you don't get to see the character in your book in front of this amazing background and so forth, and the explosions and the creatures that are after them and so forth, because very often you're reading just, Jack turned and ran. He looked back. It was coming after him. What was coming after him? And for most people, to imagine something that we can create in film is very difficult. So you sort of get, part of the story, part of the literature, but we're able to fill in the rest. We are able to embellish the backgrounds and the incredible action and the characters and creating even simple romantic comedies and all. We are able to get an emotional reaction out of an audience in an environment that may not be obvious. We can create a unique environment. So I think that where we're going is more and more towards this magic and filling in the blanks that a lot of people don't do when they're just reading, or when we were making films even just 20 or 30 years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. And like on that subject, they're talking about films that were made 20, 30, 40 years ago. John Carpenter's The Thing was notoriously met with overly negative reviews upon release, but it's now considered to be one of the greatest horror films ever made. I know that it was a massive, massive inspiration on this podcast beginning in the first place. But what my question is for you is, obviously now that movie is very beloved. People just praise that movie to no end and celebrate it every year that goes by. But at the time, did you see John's vision for the film when you were photographing it? Or was this maybe one of the times where you were a little skeptical of how crazy all the effects were and everything that you had to fit on screen? Yeah, so I guess I was just wondering if you saw his vision.
Yeah, I think so, because John was, very imaginative, but he also let other people run with his imagination. Rob Bottin's creatures that he created. The fact that I was able to create a world with light and shadow inside and outside the camp out in the snow, and all of that, I think, was what happens on a film that becomes somehow appreciated and exceptional, is the fact that everybody involved on it, whether it's The Thing or Back to the Future or Roger Rabbit or Jurassic Park or whatever, everybody involved is invested. They all say, "Oh, this could be really great." Nobody says, "Yeah, oh, another day at work. I guess I'm going to have to just design some creature." Everybody gets so involved and uses the inspiration and ideas of others to build on your own, that those films sometimes are ahead of time. I mean, The Thing came out when there were movies about two aliens. One was E.T., the happy alien, and everybody loved the happy alien. And it was a positive story about an alien, as opposed to this one about this awful thing up here down in the Antarctic, and these poor guys trapped, and so it was a different kind of creature story. And so the audience at the time reacted with their box office tickets, and and there were the people who wrote the reviews, that also didn't get it quite. They thought, "Oh, well, this I've never seen one of these before. It must not be good." Over a period of time, it's shown that if I can call it this, that we were ahead of our time as far as the audience sensibilities, the style and technique of storytelling, of design of strange, weird creatures, and so forth. So I think I think it's fun to have worked on various films that were ahead of their time. That at the time the audience said, "Huh," and all of the reviewers said, "Well, I don't know." And over a period of time, people have said, "Wait a second, how did that get by me?" What an imaginative, inventive film that was, and still is. So that's one of the things I really appreciate about my job, because you never work a day in your life if you do what you enjoy doing. And I've had a lot of jobs, but I've never really worked. I've just been part of a creative force that is created these things we call films, and they're getting more and more inventive, and we're able to see them now even more easily. You don't have to worry about you wore out your VHS tape. I'm going to have to go buy another. Now you can just, go online or on your computer and find so many films, historical old films. I encourage people to watch historical old films. And I don't mean historical old films from the 80s or 70s.
Yeah.
I'm talking about going to something like Turner Classic Movies or just online and watch films that intrigued an audience at a particular time. And how was the storytelling done? And are the characters still valid for our sensibilities and our imaginations? And how did they tell the story differently? And a lot of times, if I teach a class, I'll ask, how many of you have watched Casablanca recently? How many have seen a black and white movie? And there are no hands. And I say, that's like being an English major and saying, well, I'm not going to waste my time on Mark Twain and Shakespeare and Charles Dickens. Well, no, you have to understand where, as filmmakers, we have come from and what's the legacy. But also as an audience, you need to watch old films and say, where as people have we come from? Whereas people who read and understand and watch stories, what touches us? And how does that fit into the things that I find relevant or that move me?
Actually had a question. You'd mentioned kind of about being ahead of the curve, which you've done quite a bit in your career. What was the difference working with, I believe it was ILM, with something like Roger Rabbit versus Jurassic Park, which are polar opposites in terms of their feeling and emotion, but you also having to create those characters, or leave space, I guess, for them. Was that quite difficult and a learning experience?
Well, I look with a lot of satisfaction on the fact that when I was doing films like Roger Rabbit or Jurassic, we were ahead of the curve. For Jurassic Park, nobody had ever done a photorealistic creature in a computer. They'd always been models and animated or whatever. And with Roger Rabbit, we took a storytelling technique that's been around since the silence. Disney started off with Alice in Cartoonland, which was a live-action girl composited into a cartoon world, an animated world. So that storytelling technique has been around, and Disney said, well, you guys, we did Pete's Dragon and various other films. That's how you do it. And we decided we were going to go beyond what had been done before. So just like with Jurassic Park and the computer, we developed techniques for compositing animated characters into the real world in a believable way, a more believable way. And so I look with satisfaction with the fact those films still hold up. That we were ahead of the curve to the extent that you don't look at Jurassic Park comparing it to the other Jurassic Parks, and then say, oh well, I can tell the difference. Look at the computer work is too jerky, or there are matte lines around the creatures composited in, or whatever. You can watch the movie and just be absorbed with the story and not aware of the technique or technology.
How do you feel that Jurassic Park has held up? I'm assuming you've checked out Jurassic World and some of the sequels in terms of how they've changed the design quite a bit. Do you have any comment on kind of that versus the original?
No, I I have seen them. And I think the sequels do what people try to do with sequels. They say, well, that was really good, that last one, but ours is going to have ... And they invent or try to invent new things, maybe some technology, characters, action, and if you look at films over a period of time, like Fast and Furious, over a period of time, now that they're at number 9, all of the action is completely impossible. It takes us on a journey that's impossible, but, we for some reason enjoy that because, it wasn't possible in the past. The first Fast and Furious was about guys racing cars.
And stealing DVD players.
Exactly.
I often forget that. Yeah.
And if you look at the trailer for the new one, there are trucks flying and people jumping off of buildings in ways that would kill them in an instant.
I can't wait.
But he survives, and I think that with the Jurassic Parks, they're always looking to up the ante, and the computer allows them to do that more and more. We had a limit of 150 computer shots, computer-generated shots that were allowed by the budget and by the fact that they had no idea whether it would work. So Universal said, I'm sorry, boys, you can only do 150 dinosaur shots or whatever. Now that's 150 shots per scene, and we've come a long way in the storytelling, but also what the computer allows us to do to go sometimes overboard, and the audience. I think I sometimes wonder if you showed some of these movies to an audience, if you could go back to the 30s or 40s and run one of the movies. And Jurassic Park is probably not a good example because there were films being made in the 30s like King Kong and stuff about these moving large creatures. But like Fast and Furious 9, would an audience say, what? No, that's ridiculous. This is a stupid movie. But we are now getting used to expecting that. If it doesn't do that, if it doesn't go over the top, we go the opposite way and say, oh, that was a stupid movie. It was too real. I could drive down the freeway and see that.
Well, talking about how film has changed and adapted over time, horror as a genre has drastically evolved over time. What do you think are some of the major, I guess, visual changes that horror has undergone over the years? And I guess furthermore, what do you look for in a horror film, or what do you think makes a successful horror film?
Well, I think horror was always about imagination, about the experience that we are glad we're not going to have. Whether it's a guy chasing us with a knife, or whether you go back to the old days of Frankenstein and Dracula, when those films came out in the 30s, that was a new kind of experience for an audience, a chance to experience an emotion that we were all glad we didn't have to experience in real life, and we could participate. And so I think horror over a period of time has remained a staple of the kind of films that an audience wants to enjoy, because it does give you that chance to dabble in the dark emotion that you're glad you don't have to do in real life. Except for some people who sadly have guys with knives after them, but for the most part, we elect by choice to go and experience this dark emotion, and so I think that over a period of time we've gotten more explicit, you might say. There's obviously a lot more blood. Halloween, we didn't use any blood. It was all of the terror and the killing and everything was implied, you might say. There was no squirting of blood anywhere. And so over a period of time, there's sort of no, pour more blood on him. It's got to drip all over the floor. So I think that's been one of the things that have changed about horror. The way it's gotten more explicit, the way the stories are told, and they make it more contemporary. Yes, we still have creatures that are impossible. We know are impossible. We know we will never meet one of those. But then there's also horror that is about the potential of our own experience of being chased by a guy with a knife.
One of the last movies horror movies actually you worked on was Deep Rising way back in 1997. I believe you're on second unit for that. And you've moved on to quite a bit of different genres since then. Is horror something you ever plan on coming back to? Or I know you did work on Creepshow a long time ago. Is that something you've considered maybe they're currently going, I believe they're having their third season or just finished their second at least?
I think that I always looked at horror as one of the best visual storytelling genres. So much of it is engaging the audience with the visuals, with where the camera goes and how it tells the story. And so I was delighted because I had done these action films that were, as I said, a good training ground. I was delighted when Halloween came out, and it was interesting because we were talking about the popularity of the thing and so forth. When Halloween came out, the first week, the box office was, not very impressive, and everyone said, "Well, I guess people don't want to see that." Well, the second week, it doubled. The third week was even bigger, and it was proof that the word of mouth was, informing the audience that they would like this experience. And so I think that that's one of the things that we talk about in other films that are, some of them are not successes because they're just bad films. They don't tell the story properly. Others are become popular, like The Thing, because the audience catches on and says, "Hey, wait a second, how'd I miss that?" Or you got to go see this; it's amazing, or whatever. So I think that one of the things about horror was the fact that it was such a dramatic visual storytelling. It relied so heavily on the camera that I was delighted by that. And I did Halloween 2 and 3, and I was getting calls all the time for people who said, "Hey, look at all what Halloween did. Let's us make us a horror film." And you'd read a script and say, "No, that they missed it." And I didn't want to get typed into the horror guy. There are some guys that did. I immediately looked for other kinds of films, small films, a little musical, a car chase thing, something so that I wasn't only going to be offered, horror films. And so I have since then have mostly tried to do anything that I consider visual storytelling. Roger Rabbit, because it was a world that required the camera. Jurassic Park, you could call that horror or adventure or whatever, but it required the camera to tell the story, and all of the decisions that you make to capture the image, the lighting and lenses and all kinds of stuff. So I immediately said, well, let's only do films that are, the best choices are the ones that are all about visual storytelling. So I made a conscious effort to try to select and look for those kinds of films, and I've been fortunate in finding quite a number of them.
Speaking of like visual storytelling, like one last question for me is, and back to Halloween again, is like you've been credited for being one of the very first cinematographers to use like fluid shots that are now known as Steadicam shots. What was it about Halloween that inspired you to try this at the time, which was a less conventional camera technique?
Well, just about the time of Halloween, they had invented the Steadicam, and in the case of Panavision, the camera rental company, they built their own, the Panaglide, which was essentially a copy. John was very interested in doing something unique with the camera. He knew that the camera was the hero of the storytelling. So when we discovered this, I went to Panavision and I tried this thing on, and I'd actually gone to Todd AO and used it once before on a film, their version, which was the Steadicam, and I was so impressed by what you could do with it. In moving a camera before required the camera either being on a very big dolly and limiting where you could put it. You couldn't go down a little narrow hallway and follow a character up the stairs and all of that. So the camera on the dolly was a tool that is used, still predominantly. But moving the camera, they had come up with lighter cameras and they could handhold them. In fact, put them on their shoulder, move the camera, you walk and follow or lead an actor. But it was almost impossible to get rid of, the camera movement that was created by your body, by your walking, by your body swaying side to side. And it was an artificial sort of look compared to what we were used to seeing in movies. We were used to seeing very stable shots and smooth movement, and I've always found it distracting because in real life we don't go through life handheld. We go through life with Steadicam. Our eyes, our brain, everything stabilizes the shot. So as you walk, you're not seeing bouncing and jiggling and side-to-side movement. You're seeing a very steady movement. And that's how we perceive the world with reality. So the Steadicam was the device that allowed us now with a camera to move an audience the same way they would go through life, with a smooth, steady movement, but into places that, you couldn't get a camera. Up the stairs and around the corner and through the hallway and through the restaurant and around the table and all of the things that people would do in real life. You could take them on that journey with the Steadicam. And so I immediately gravitated to that idea. And John did also. And so we made the camera a participating character. We made the audience a participating camera participating member of the the show, the story and the characters, and it was fun to do that, and for other people to say, "Hey, wait, I can see a use for this thing," and I think it really helped other people see what the potential for the camera.
That is fantastic insight into a very seminal piece of horror and film history. Thank you so much for that. We won't take up too much of your time here, Dean, but I would be remiss not to ask you this question since we are a horror podcast. Dean, do you have a favorite horror film?
It's interesting. I mean, I don't see them typically. I've seen recently. I saw a Quiet Place and a few things like that, because just trying to stay up with what's popular with an audience. But people always ask me, can I watch a movie, for the story and the characters? And I think my answer to that is yes, I can. I watch with two halves of my brain. I watch the story and the storytelling and what the director and the writers and the characters are doing. But I also, the other half of my brain says, oh, that's an interesting camera move. Oh, I love the lighting in the background. Oh, so it's hard to disengage from that because You're appreciating other people's work. You're stealing good ideas, and I've always said that the thing you want to do in this business is steal good ideas. Don't steal bad ones. That's right. That would be stupid. Right. But and we learn from each other. We find out, oh, that's an interesting technique, or oh yeah, I did that and he liked it, and yeah, and it still works, and so I don't know if I could say I have a favorite horror film. I have films I appreciate, for the work they've done, and other ones I appreciate for the intensity of the visual effects, but not necessarily for their choice of doing it that way, because it suddenly pulls you out of the storytelling. So I guess that's the long answer of. I can't tell you what.
That's a great answer. That's more than fine. But yeah, Dean, thank you so much for taking some time today. We'll let you go. You've been so generous with your time with us today. But before we let you go, I just wanted to let you know that the three of us here at the Terror Table, we are all aspiring filmmakers. And like your cinematic voice and your talents, they've truly been monumental and instrumental on our film love and our pursuit of a career in film. So thank you so much for all of your contributions to cinema and for just, helping bring some of the most instrumental movies of our time to life.
Well, it's been absolutely my pleasure to have been part of them and to have been part of presenting them to an audience that eventually appreciates, what we've done and how we've been able to sort of further the art and craft of storytelling and filmmaking.
Awesome. Well, it was lovely to meet you, Dean. So
yeah,
thank you so much.
This was fantastic.
Been my pleasure. And
thanks so much, Dean.
Of course. Thanks to the audience for listening.
Yeah, absolutely. I know our listener base is going to be so excited when they see that you're coming on. So we can't wait for people to hear this. But yeah, we'll let you go. Hope you're staying safe and healthy and happy and enjoy your summer coming.
Well, thanks very much.
Awesome. Okay. Well, thank you so much. And we'll talk to you later.
Take care.